Either mic is picking up. We got 3 cameras, 2 microphones, and 1 dumbass. That's perfect.
No.
That is the recipe for success. Hello, this is Dr. Dan Langley. What would be best to kind of begin a series of eye-opening discussions than to talk about what you care about? Or do you even care? I think that's the question that we need to kind of ask ourselves, is that do we even care? Do you care? If you don't care, why don't you care? It's been challenging over the last several years to figure out why we care about the things we care about, and in fact, battle with circumstances and people, global pandemics that have convinced us really not to care about others, to sequester ourselves in our homes. Now is a time for us to start asking ourselves, do we care and do you care? And if you do care, excellent. That is a step in the right direction. Many of us don't really care because we've been programmed to not really care, to just accept the status quo, to sit down, to be quiet, to be obedient. And that's okay unless you want to actually have more purpose in your life. And so if we want to cultivate a purpose-driven life, then we have to really ask ourselves, what do we care about? What do I care about as a personality? What do I care about as a person living and making their way in the world? Asking ourselves those questions, we may not have had a chance to ask ourselves what we do care about. There are many things that are vying for our attention and that influence us, and we may not even know it. So the things that we care about may not be in alignment with what we actually think we should care about or what we could care about. And it's our inability to recognize that we are granted kind of the superpower of caring. And that if we're not aware of this, then it can be squandered on a daily basis simply through programming and indoctrination of choices that may have been given to us over the course of our lifetime. Say that we care about politics, and we learned that we should really care about the right or the left or who's right and who's wrong because that's what our parents did and that's what their grandparents did. We didn't quite choose that for ourselves. That was kind of implanted in us. Or maybe we care about our special sports team. Maybe we were born in Dallas and so we're definitely a Dallas Cowboy. Or maybe we were born in Kansas City, so we're a Kansas City Chief. And maybe we didn't really even get to choose that because our parents dressed us up in baby gear when we were younger in either Cowboys or Chiefs outfits. Or maybe none of those, maybe Seahawks. But still, we need to ask ourselves, why do we care about these things? And is it of our own free choice, or has somehow someone, sometime, placed this idea of caring for something that on further investigation, we may not actually care about that? Part of the reason why we're having this discussion is to just kind of take a pulse of where we are. If we don't care about anything, then why is that? And I know nowadays we have many reasons to not really care about much. We felt like we had no power over our lives. We were locked in our houses for many years. The economy spirals out of control. We have wars all around the world. And no matter how much we care about those things, it doesn't seem like we can move the needle at all. So over time, we simply get jaded and say, why should I even care? Even if I care, it's not going to make any difference. There's a book I read many years ago called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in it, Stephen Covey talks about your sphere of influence and your sphere of concern. And the sphere of influence is what you have control over. But our sphere of concern is what we simply care about, right? And the discordance comes when a sphere of concern exceeds the sphere of our influence. Then we're powerless. We care about things that we have no control over, we have no effect on. And so it diminishes our power. Because ultimately, when we get down to it, when we start speaking about what we care about, that is what we focus our attention on. We have a certain energy, a certain power that resides inside of us. And if we want to call that consciousness, if we want to call that attention, I just simply call it what we care about. What is important to us, what we give regard to. And it's that special thing that's inside of us that we can then direct. But if we don't know that we have that inside of us, and we don't know how to direct it, then we can become very frustrated very quickly. And that can lead to apathy and or just to acquiescence and surrender or just giving up. And so what I'd like to do is simply ask that question. If you don't care, then let's find out the reasons why you don't care, and let's see if we can't give you something that more aligns with something you actually have concern about, that aligns with your sphere of influence as well. That way, if you care about something and you also have influence over it, then you're much more likely to be able to direct it in the way that you'd like. A great example of this is whether a friend of mine, likes drinking alcohol. And I may personally not like to drink alcohol, but I take it personally offensive when my friend drinks the alcohol. Well, I might have a little bit of influence over that person, but that person can also decide to do what they want because they're in control of their life. Now, it would be better, since I have influence over myself, if I just stayed concerned with myself. And so some of these adages of mind your own business kind of resonate, but sometimes that's a crass way of saying a profound piece of wisdom, is that the best place to place your attention, your care, what you're concerned with, is on yourself. Not in a selfish way per se, as we would think of that, but in a way that allows you to have influence and control over your life and the things that you do, whether it be the thoughts that you have on a daily basis, whether it be the emotions that carry you throughout the weeks of the ebb and flow of high emotions and low emotions, or whether it's the actions that you decide to take or decide that you don't decide to take. If we spend more time discovering what it truly is that we care about, and that care actually aligns with what we have influence over, which is ourself, which is the thoughts that we have on a daily basis, it's the feelings that we have on a moment-to-moment basis, and it's the actions that we decide to take every single moment of our life. And this is the very first place to start, is, am I in control of my thoughts? Do I care about the type of thoughts that I have? What are the quality of the thoughts that I have? And we're not really taught all that often in school, college, high school, whatever I call it in education. We're not really taught on how to cultivate the type of thoughts that we'd like to have. We simply accept other people's thoughts as the gospel, or we accept other people's thoughts as that's the way it should be, and we don't really give another moment of attention or another moment of caring into if those thoughts are even conducive to achieving the type of results that we want. So if we recognize that the power that ultimately we can acquire is to be mindful of what we care about, and then to try to cultivate that and then mold it to create the type of life that we want. So if we think about our consciousness as a garden, and we've seen many gardens before that with neglect, those gardens seem to grow weeds. And actually some gardens remain barren. So we have a decision to make to say, do we want to plant, what type of seeds do we want to plant in our garden? Well, if we don't care, we can plant whatever. And sometimes that's how we live life. Well, I don't really care what we should plant in our garden. And, days, months, years go by, and next thing you know, we have a big thistle tree or a big briar bush full of thorns. And then we say, well, how did this thorn bush get here? Well, it was our lack of caring that allowed a seed of a thistle or a briar patch to crop up in our soil. Whereas if we're mindful of what we plant in our garden, and we care, then we can choose the seeds that we want to plant in there. And not only can we choose the seeds, but we can choose the type of nutrients that we provide to that seed. If we're really mindful, if we do pay attention to what we care about, then over time we can cultivate a lovely garden of our choosing. And by a lovely garden, I simply mean this is analogous for the life that we want to try to create. So hopefully we're starting to get the picture of how what we care about, or the idea that we have consciousness that we can direct and that we can manicure and cultivate a certain specific type of consciousness, then there isn't anything that we cannot create. From a glowing, gorgeous garden of a multitude of beautiful, fragrant, colorful flowers, or to a swampy briar patch full of thistles and poison ivy and stinging nettles. It really is up to us. And simply because we don't know that this is the reality does not remove ourselves from the consequences of our own ignorance. And so in a way, we are the cause of our own problems. And the sooner that we recognize that, the sooner we can take control of that as well. And so just simply learning about what consciousness is and how that then applies to me as a personal individual unit of that consciousness. And then by working with that caring, with that consciousness, we can start to understand what consciousness even is. And as I'd mentioned earlier, it is the superpower that we're all born with. In past societies and or even in past generations, we may have been taught that we don't really have that superpower because we are born separate from the Creator. And I can understand that perspective. I personally believe that perspective is very disempowering, but I can understand the allure of that if everybody was kind of given that perspective as a child. But I'm offering an alternative perspective, that we are not separate from the Creator. As Jesus had said, the Father and I are one. And he wasn't just talking about himself, he was talking about all of us. He was talking about all of humanity. And if we choose to care about that statement, the statement that Jesus made, or the statement that sometimes we hear in the pulpit or at our local synagogue or temple or even church, we can still choose to cultivate what we care about. Do we care about the story that's going to empower us to say that we do have a choice and that we do have responsibilities for that choice? That if we do embrace the possibility, or as I see it, the reality, that caring is the only really thing that we are given on this. And if you want to call it a divine spark of the Creator, if you want to call it our Holy Ghost, if you want to call it their Atma or Brahma, whatever word you want to describe that individual spark of divinity that resides inside of all of us, we can either choose to believe that possibility, we can choose to care about that possibility, or we can choose to say, nah, I don't really care about that. But ask yourself, what would produce the better garden? Ignoring that possibility, discounting that possibility, or maybe even embracing that possibility, leaning into that possibility, cultivating that possibility. So I'm of the opinion that if we simply embrace that idea, that maybe just a seedling in our imagination, and then we start to shape that through cultivated thoughts. We start to be mindful of our thoughts. We start to say, are these thoughts going to service my desire to have a beautiful, fragrant garden? And if so, then we try to keep those thoughts. If those thoughts kind of stray from that, then maybe we should pull those thoughts and replace them with other thoughts. And what about our emotions? We're not just thoughts, of course, so we do have emotions as well. And so rarely are we taught to sit in our own emotional energy. It's challenging, and they don't teach us to do that. Our parents weren't really taught to do that. If we act up nowadays, it's like, well, put that person on some medication because they can't deal with their emotions. And I believe that's a disempowering choice. The only way you ever get good at anything is simply by practice. And if we're robbed of the opportunity to practice dealing with our emotions, and by dealing, I simply mean sitting with, processing, understanding our emotions, then there's no possible way that we could apply those emotions in a meaningful, productive way throughout our life. And thus we become the victim of our inability to harness, control, and to direct our emotions in a positive, harmonious, loving, kind, and caring way, especially if that's what we want for our life. Now, maybe we don't want that type of life. Maybe we want one of suffering and despair. And I know that sounds kind of strange, yet I meet people every day, even when presented with the opportunity to choose joy and happiness and prosperity. Because it's their choice, they choose to have some narrative that empowers the opposite choice, which is that, oh, I can't do that, or somebody did this to me, and so now I can't find happiness because I am a victim. And I understand that, and that can be challenging. However, at any moment, we can simply tell ourselves a different version of that story. We can care differently about that. Instead of caring in a way that disempowers us, we can simply, through an act of cultivating our thoughts and the emotions that support that thought, and then the actions that support the emotions that support the thoughts, we can create a different story through our imagination. We can say, no, although those bad things happened to me, I think that they happened to me to allow me to see that I am in control of my life, that I actually have the power that I didn't realize I had before. And sometimes it takes a profound adversary, a challenge in our life, an obstacle to overcome for us to rise to the occasion. And so that's what I'm hopeful that this series will do for us, is that will allow us to regain our power that we all have. And I'm telling you, no matter what anybody else has said, we do have that divine spark inside of us. And it's about time that we had the discussions that would allow us to cultivate that fact so that we can all live happy, prosperous, and effective lives. Ultimately, we're here to figure out why we're here and to live the best life that we possibly can. And one way that we can do that is by simply having some discussions about these exact topics. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share this time with you. And I'm really looking forward to having some further eye-opening discussions. Thank you so much.